For this project, I'm going to be talking about the review of SLP scholarship at the intersection of diversity. So the first thing that I read was ASHA's response to racism, and ASHA's position statement makes it clear that they don't tolerate racism and that they support all of their Black professionals, clients, patients, students, and families and everyone else involved. And they also recognize that there has historically been and still continues to be discrimination in education and healthcare systems, and they're calling on their members in the organization to change that. So their statement does say that they're going to try to do this by just having real conversations and expanding the amount of culture that they include into the profession, but they don't really explain how they're exactly going to do that. So I think that it's a good step that they're trying to be more equal and inclusive in the future, but saying they're going to do something is way different than actually implementing a plan to do it. The next statement that I read was ASHA's envisioned future for 2025. And so part of their goal is that they want to be the go-to if anybody has questions about anything communication sciences and disorders related. So they want ASHA and other health and education organizations to develop relationships that can really help each other, because they realize that collaboration is really helpful in improving their services for everybody. And a good point that they included in their statement was that they want to have better coordination between the practice and reimbursement systems. So they said that they want the whole process to be more family and person-centered. So this would help increase access to services for more people. And in their statement, they also made similar statements as the response to racism, and just saying like they want to put more inclusive policies that all of their members will practice. So overall, ASHA wants to be more accessible to all people and to just advocate for people with communication disorders. And they also want their professionals to be culturally competent so that they can respect their coworkers and patients and everybody else that they work with. Okay, so the first article that I read was Multicultural Issues in Audiology, and this article had a survey that asked professionals how likely they were to be responsive to culturally and linguistically diverse clients and patients. So the results show that the majority were very unlikely to learn another language or unlikely to train interpreters or use them. And with that, a small amount said that they were very likely to increase the time they spend to complete evaluations for clients whose first language was not English, and they were not likely to develop an action plan for their clients that could not clearly communicate with them at all at first. And so these results really surprised me that a lot of the professionals weren't willing to put in the time or the effort to work with clients who are culturally and linguistically diverse, because a big part of their job is to want to help people with speech and language disorders. So I think that that should include everyone and not just the people that they feel more comfortable with or are easier to work with. So the same article went on to explain how professionals either don't have the ability to identify the multicultural issues found within the audiology system, or they don't have the awareness of the need to address the issues going on. So there's pretty much an increase in diversity in all aspects of life, and this is no different in like the diversity of SLP clients. So right now, professionals aren't recognizing this or modifying how they treat patients that come from different backgrounds. So because of this, there's an increased need to be familiarized by the cultural and linguistic differences that all clients have. So professionals really need to develop more inclusive relationships with their clients that they're working with so they can better meet the needs of more people and not just the ones that look like them or that they're comfortable working with or are just easier to work with. The next article that I read was Speech Language Pathology and Ethical Practice in Global Context. So unless thoroughly planned, work that has like good intentions can actually lead to hurting those people that they're wanting to help. So reading this article helped me realize that the main goal of SLPs is to help people communicate, and their work should be focused on that, like that should be their priority. So a lot of times they're too focused on the idea that the majority world needs the help from the minority world in order to succeed, but that's just not the case. So this frame of mind motivates those minority world professionals, but sort of in the wrong way that can be harmful to those that are actually living in the majority world communities. So these global working SLPs might think that going into the majority world country for a month or two is like significantly benefiting them, but in reality, they should be looking at the long-term benefits and the effects that could happen if that effort was put instead into maybe like a local program that has the ability to stay longer and connect with the patients better and just overall help everyone else better. And so that's why there needs to be honest conversations about SLP's motivations for working globally. So another thing that this article talked about was like sort of the misconceptions about how most people might believe that providing something is better than doing nothing at all. But this article helped me realize that that's not always the case. So an example that they gave was donating a technology item. So at first, this could be viewed as super helpful and super generous, but you really have to look at the big picture of this. So if that piece of technology breaks and they don't have access to or the ability to repair it, then it really isn't doing them any good. So instead, what professionals should do is make use of and develop materials that the people can actually use. So, for example, if you're going into a majority world country, you probably shouldn't bring a picture book depicting things mostly found in the minority world. Instead, you should create activities that include familiar objects and people in the local area that can actually be used and benefit the people there, and like something that they can really connect with so it helps them more in the long run. And another good point that I thought this reading pointed out was the realities about money. So they explained that it costs the same to fund one volunteer working a month or to fund a local team that works on sustainable projects with local resources. So this stuck out to me because to me there's obviously a benefit over one over the other. And so the money paid to bring over one visitor could instead be used to pay a local SLP who understands the culture and the people there. So I'm not trying to say that like all speech paths should stay in their own lane and stay in their own country and just not be open at all to helping people that they're not familiar with. But my main point is that unless they're fully committed to being a long-term help in that foreign culture, there are more sustainable options that can benefit the locals in more ways. So in all, there just needs to be more long-term planning and evaluation in order to be successful. So the main idea here is that looking at the long term versus just what's going on in the short term is important when talking about any kind of development work. So working and improving on what already exists instead of bringing in tons of new activities and projects is something that SLPs that are working globally can work on. So the last article that I read was the integrating lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer issues into the multicultural curriculum in speech language pathology. And so this article basically talks about how there's been an increase in education about multicultural issues like race, ethnicity, and language, but LGBTQ culture has just been left out. So most of the CSD educators teaching about diversity issues leave out anything having to do with LGBTQ culture, and this is a huge problem because it leads to current students that are going to be future professionals. They don't know how to treat patients that identify in this way. And so there really needs to be an increase in discussions about this culture so future SLPs will be able to better understand and provide the best services that they can for these people. So, like other civil rights movements, including race, gender, and ability, the LGBTQ community has struggled for equal rights as well. So, the history of this community can be used to teach current students and future professionals how to do better. So, just being really intentional about teaching LGBTQ culture in the students or in the classroom to students right now can lead to future professionals understanding that all of their services need to be more inclusive. So working as a speech path in the future, there's no doubt that I'll be able to work with LGBTQ clients. So it's important that I'm prepared with the right skills to be able to give everybody just qualified services that can best fit their needs. So the main point from this article that I took away was that teachers need to start teaching about LGBTQ culture and topics and issues early on so their future speech paths can be prepared with the right skills and attitudes to provide the best and most inclusive services possible. So my last part is my reflection. And so one big takeaway that I got was that a lot of SLP cases, like their clients and caseloads, they're increasing in diversity, and OSHA and other organizations are putting out a lot of statements that are committing to inclusion and equality, but a lot of people aren't modifying their approaches to reflect this. A lot of the readings talked about how policies and documents explicitly stress the importance of recognizing race and ethnicity and sexual orientation, but many also showed that putting these values actually in practice has not really been a priority for a lot of people. So this is a problem of them saying they will do something, but not actually following through. So on paper, organizations like OSHA have expressed their commitment to being diverse and accepting all professionals, clients, patients, and students. For instance, their response to racism and their Envision Future statement includes goals that they have for the organization to be more collaborative and open up services to more people, but the studies and research that I read have not really shown significant improvement. Based on the articles, it seems like SLPs are putting their feelings above those of the patients that they're supposed to be helping. So an example was in the Multicultural Issues in Audiology article. The results showed that a very little number of professionals said that they were willing to increase the amount of time they put into making accurate action plans for clients that may not be the most proficient in English. And so I kind of got the idea that most of them don't want to put in the time to work with those that cannot clearly communicate with them right away. And that really surprised me because the whole point of being an SLP or an audiologist or going into the profession is to help with this sort of problem, but a lot of people aren't willing to work with language differences. And the LGBTQ article also talked about how OSHA policy documents have talked about the importance of including sexual orientation, gender identity, and transgender communication topics in curriculums. But right now, there's still not a focus at all on these things. And so just because they're writing it out and hoping that their members follow the guidelines, it doesn't mean that it's actually happening in the actual classrooms or in their practices or whatever. And so that's just another way that the organizations have put it on paper, but not in practice. And then the second thing that I'm going to reflect on is the education that is needed. So based on my readings of the different articles and statements, I think that educating current students early on about these issues will lead to better outcomes in the future. Education is really needed to prepare future SLPs about all the different clients that they'll see and how to just adequately take care of them. An example is how the OSHA policies express the importance of recognizing LGBTQ cultures, but the majority of practicing SLPs don't even have the education or the skill set that they need to help clients in this area. So future professionals need to be educated now to understand and be prepared for all the types of clients that they're going to have to work with. So not doing this will only expand the amount of time that these historically marginalized groups have dealt with inadequate services. The Global Context article also talked about the importance of universities getting involved in educating their students. So SLPs in minority world universities really have the ability and the responsibility and all the resources to directly educate their students about global issues and how it will impact their future work. So there's a big need for the profession to be honest about what's going on and reflect on history to improve their practices in the future. So all in all, learning needs to be more hands-on and direct to include more of what SLPs need to give the best services and experiences to all of their clients.